In this episode, we will explore how to sequence and chunk the principles that you described in the previous module into a sound and logical learning path that will facilitate your learners to successfully work through the program and achieve the purpose of the program. First, review all the principles that you have described for the whole program and look for the most logical sequence that these principles can be learned. Consider what the easiest path will be for your target learners, and especially how some of the principles will build on other principles that will need to precede them. One common approach is to put the most basic or simpler principles earlier in the sequence, and the more complicated and challenging principles later in the sequence. The start of your sequence will determine what the entry-level requirements for learners to begin your program will be. The end of your sequence should end with the purpose of the program being achieved. Another approach is to focus more on just understanding the principles earlier in the sequence, and then on employing the principles later on. But be careful with this, because separating the theoretical from the practical elements of a program can make it challenging for the learners to make the proper connections between theory and practice. Once you have your sequence looking logical and complete, your next step is to chunk the sequence of principles into clusters that have a common theme or idea. Typically, you will not want to have more than 4 principles in each cluster, with 2 or 3 being the ideal number. As you determine your clusters, you should also consider either blending the required principles with optional principles into the same clusters, or to separate the required principles into core clusters and the optional principles into optional clusters. One final check that you should do at this point is to review your sequence of clusters to check on how well they articulate with each other. Will some of the clusters be prerequisites of other clusters following them in the sequence? If they are, is it clear that the principles of the prerequisite clusters will prepare the learners to successfully learn the following clusters? At this point, you should determine which clusters will be prerequisites or corequisites to what other clusters within the program. In summary, the 3 principles you should remember and be able to employ from this presentation are: 1. People learn new principles best by associating them with principles they have previously learned. 2. Learning paths can be mapped out to help learners learn several principles more successfully. And 3. Courses are best designed based on clusters of principles sequenced at the program level.